one of the critical processes or the mechanisms in sales enablement ends up being, how do you measure sales readiness? So enterprises or organizations actually train their salespeople. This is something that most organizations do. And usually they end up spending a lot of money doing it. Right? There's an abundance of data which shows that if you spend a lot on sales readiness programs, you will attain some sort of nirvana and you will outperform your competition. Right? So while this data is there, most companies generally don't have a good understanding of how they are deriving business value from these initiatives, right? And how to continuously improve upon the initiatives. So Sumit touched upon continuous improvement. So you need to be able to convert these initiatives into competitive, long-standing competitive differentiation. So the impact of sales readiness programs today, when we speak to a lot of our customers, we are given to understand that the way they measure impact is usually conducting surveys of the attendees who have attended training programs, or counting the number of people who have completed a digital learning program. But that's kind of not good enough, right? If you want to create, or if you want to differentiate yourself, and Mary spoke about how the whole sales readiness, or what the kind of skills that you need in today's context is increasingly different from what you traditionally had. So you need to be able to measure these skills, and you need to be able to assure yourselves that these things are working for you, right? Now, it is important, therefore, to be able to measure these in a real world setting, and you should adopt an investor mindset. So measure the real world outcomes and to invest in the readiness programs that are working for you and build the resources that work for you. So I'm going to introduce a very simple approach that you can get started with. And this is something that we advocate and put into practice with most of the customers who work with us. So the first and foremost is, while you need to have a good understanding of indicators for sales readiness. Companies usually have very good understanding of indicators for sales performance improvements, and we have seen things like share of wallet, premiumization, growth rates, quota attainment. There are lots of sales performance measurement indicators that companies use. But we haven't seen really good examples of indicators that measure the sales readiness, right? So you should build one first and foremost. The second thing is you need to establish a framework for continuous measurement. Sales is dynamic environment. The competitors are changing their products, their approaches. There's a lot of churn. You lose people, you gain people. So it's a very, very dynamic environment. So you need to have a method where you are continuously measuring the sales readiness of your field, right? And once you've attained that, actually you need to then create the input-output relationship between sales readiness metric, the indicators and the real-world outcomes, and to review and revise this input-output mechanism frequently, right? So 1, 2, 3. Simple enough, very difficult to put in practice. So let's talk a little bit about some very basic ideas of how you can get started doing that. So the first step is you need to design a sales readiness indicator, right? So what we do is when we work with our clients, we actually have a single enterprise indicator for measurement. Now, this measurement needs to have a few attributes. First is you need to have some objectives, right? The objectives could be certain product lines or some skill sets. You have, go ahead, build any number of objectives and just start documenting them. The second attribute is a way to measure. It's really an algorithm. And we have seen examples of simple approach, which is just, I'm going to give some 10 questions to every salesperson every month, which are measuring against these objectives. And then I'm going to just see what is the proportion of correct answers they give. Or, on our system, you can enable some more complex methods, which is, you have modeled what is the knowledge erosion over time. You have modeled what is the difficulty level of each question based on a given population. There are all kinds of complications that you can bring in. And we have seen examples of customers using very simple approaches on our platform to very complex approaches on our platform, right? You will improve this indicator over time, and it usually becomes some kind of an ensemble method. The third thing that you need to have are entities. Now, the very base minimum entities you need to have is a user, a role, a business unit, and you could have any other number of measurement units. You are basically going to aggregate around it. But one of the most important things is you should be doing it at a user level. So every individual salesperson is important and critical for your success. So you need to be able to understand the skills and skills distribution of every single salesperson. Now, there are a couple of ways that our customers use it. The first, you can see over here already. So here's an example of a distribution of the various, what we call objectives for a given salesperson. And you can compare them what is the desired level across the population, right? So the other way that we have seen customers aggregate this is, you map out all the critical objectives, and then you have all the business units or whatever entities you want to measure them by. And over here, you can see an example of, on objective 3, you have unit 4 and 5 performing very well. But objective 1, you have 3 units performing very badly. If objective 1, which say is a particular product that you are going to focus on this quarter, is important for you, then you have a problem. So you need to design some interventions around that. Right? Step 2 is you have to track, you have to create a framework for measuring and tracking this continuously, right? And without that, it is not worth. It is not good enough to do this in the beginning of the year in your sales kickoff, right? And not to revisit this thereafter. So you need to put a mechanism in place to do it continuously. So we have customers who are running 100,000 assessments every month on our platform, right? Now, the way then the outcome that it delivers is, you can then see, here's an example of a very simple approach where assessments are given to salespeople, gamified, very small, brief assessments. They're rewarded with points, and they can convert that into vouchers and all of that stuff. So engagement is a very different thing. We can do a webinar on that later. But here's an example of an individual salesperson last year. This is a real example. Last year from Jan until this Jan, how their actual skill has improved continuously throughout the year. And we have examples where the skills have gone down as well. But I'm giving you an example where it has gone up. And this is what you want to see continuously for salespeople. This is something that you want to keep an eye on, right? The other way that you can use, and this is something we do, which is we actually help you classify these skills distributions along 3 dimensions: needs improvement, meets expectation, exceed. And this is at an individual with a single objective. You can see how they rank and where they need to be and where they are. This is an information we actually can make available to the user so that they're continuously motivated to move up this scale, right? Now, this is easier said than done. So, we use a lot of technology. So one of the big challenges is, how do you design and distribute, these assessments? How do you engage people? How do you get completion rates to be very high? So there's complete, engineering around that. But a few very important things: you have to use automation. You have to personalize these questions, because different people are at different skill level. Different people have joined the organization at different times. So if you give the same thing to everybody, that will very, very quickly create disengagement with your best users, right? The other thing is, you should attempt to do dynamic classification so that you don't have to get involved. The system keeps track of where the user is with respect to their required objectives, where they need to be, and then you can make automated interventions if you do that. The third and most important probably is that you need to have a good understanding of what matters and what doesn't, right? It's very easy to create a lot of objectives and a lot of skills and stuff like that, but it is very important for you to understand and invest time in understanding what should matter and what should not, because it's very easy to create a lot of noise in this process. So you need to be able to differentiate between signal and noise. Now, here's a great example, right? We have 4 objectives over here, and you can see that objective 1 and objective 2 actually has good correlation with premiumization. Premiumization is something that our customers use as sales indicator, which is what percentage of sales is delivered for each individual salesperson for a product group that which is a premium product. Our sales objective is therefore to increase the share of that percentage. So that's what we call premiumization. And it's just simple percentage. But over here, you can see the objective 3 and 4 are pretty much random. It does not correlate very well. So we may want to throw them out, and we want to keep objective 1 and 2 and focus on these two objectives. Now, these things change. Sales, in our experience over the last 3-4 years, has been that the only way to do this successfully is to have a process by which you review and revise, and if possible, do it automatically. And that's where some of the machine learning stuff that we do is critical, in order for you to automatically select the objectives which are important, and then automate the interventions that are necessary for that. One of the things to remember is that there is a difference between correlation and causality. So it is worthwhile to invest some time in data science processes so that you can investigate thoroughly and say, over a period of time, you can create a deeper understanding of what has a causal relationship. Some of the objectives will have deep causal relationship with the outcomes, and some of them will just be correlated. You may want to think about the ones which have causality, right? But you would not know that on day one. The only way to know it is collect a lot of data, do these things, do this process, and have this process of putting together a mechanism for continuously looking, evaluating, and updating yourself. Now, this is my last slide. So, and yesterday when I was on LinkedIn, I saw this caption from Reuters. It says, some organizations react to change, build yours to prepare for it. And I liked it, and I said, okay, I'll borrow it for this session. But really, this is what it is about, right? The world is changing quite rapidly, and we see it, not just COVID, but the digitization and the various other factors which are changing the scenario for us. Most organizations are struggling to react to these changes, right? I think great organizations will start thinking ahead, and they will start thinking about building themselves the core capability to prepare for change, right? And there's a lot of things, remote sales, and Mary spoke about a lot of things. Sumit spoke about it. I'm not going to go through that, but really, what you are attempting to do eventually is you may want to consider serious automation in this area, right? Because what we have realized is that it is not possible to manually scale attention to every single user. And what each and every user is looking for is attention, it's personalization, it's guidance, it's nudging them, it's letting them do the things proactively, getting ahead of them, right? You cannot do it with manual processes. You've got to think about automation on day zero. And if you need to think about automation on day zero, if you want to create an organization which is getting ahead of the change, you may want to start with building the right sales readiness indicator. So that's my call to action for you. Thank you very much.